Did you know there's a not-so-hidden alphabet that once stretched halfway across Canada, or that it's been slowly disappearing from maps over the past century? I'm Warren Schlody. Let me show you what I mean. The map of Canada can be a busy place, especially in the prairies. There are towns and cities all over. But if you know where to look, you might spot an interesting pattern. For instance, let's head to this spot, just west of Portage-la-Prairie, Manitoba. This dot on the map used to be a railway station called Arona. Now let's head west. The next stop we hit is called Bloom. Farther west we come to Kay, then Deer, Exira, Furdale, Gregg, Hart, and so on, all in alphabetical order. What these places have in common is they were once stops on the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway. The GTP has a long and interesting backstory, but for the sake of this video, all you need to know is it was the western half of the National Transcontinental Railway. It was meant to compete with the Canadian Pacific. The GTP built its half of the line from Prince Rupert, BC to Winnipeg, as it had promised. But eventually, it went bankrupt and got absorbed into Canadian National Railways. That company still exists today as CN, more on that a little later. When railways build their routes, they give names to spots along the track. There were a lot of places, particularly farther west, that already had names, but across the vast prairies, there were long stretches that didn't have established names. And of course, the railway executives weren't about to research the indigenous place names that may have been in use for generations. I haven't been able to figure out exactly why the GTP executives chose an alphabetical naming system. The closest I've come is a 1959 column by historian Austin Cross. A railway spokesperson told him it all started at a meeting in Winnipeg. The railway's executives decided to name their stops alphabetically, unless the location already had a name. Wherever possible, they would use the names of people that they deemed important. For instance, there's Scott, Saskatchewan. It's named after Frank Scott, the railway's treasurer. The town of Landis, also in Saskatchewan, is named after U.S. Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who later became the first commissioner of baseball. Unfortunately, Austin Cross's column doesn't address the why, so that's still a bit of a mystery to me. It seems like it would be a lot more work to follow such a rigid naming pattern, and in fact, letters often got skipped along the way for no apparent reason. If you have any ideas as to why they may have chosen this alphabetical scheme, please let me know in the comments. A lot of people think of the Alphabet Railway as being unique to the prairies, but it actually existed on a route in northwestern Ontario as well. The GTP wanted to have access to Lake Superior, so they built a branch line down to Fort William, which today is part of Thunder Bay. Along that track, the alphabet pattern returns. This is a timetable from that line with the names of the old stations. Speaking of timetables, those are probably the easiest way to spot this naming pattern. Check out this timetable from Manitoba in 1911. I've read that the alphabetical naming system went as far west as Jasper, Alberta, which was originally called Fitzhugh, but when I look at this timetable from 1913, I'm not so sure that the alphabet went out that far. Name changes have interrupted the alphabet in other places too. For instance, there's Nokomis, Saskatchewan. According to a local history report, the GTP had planned a stop called Blakemore in the area, but at the same time, a nearby town was just emerging with a post office that was already named Nokomis. The railway dropped its proposed name in favor of the post office. Now, on that subject, Blakemore seems like a weird choice to me because I would expect a T name at this station. However, as we've learned, the alphabet was more of a loose guideline than a hard rule, so maybe this was just one of those exceptions. There are other places that have since dropped off the map entirely, like Treat, Manitoba. It's listed on the 1908 timetable, disappears in 1911, shows up again in 1913, and is gone by the 1960s. Today, there isn't even a railway siding here. There was one other planned exception to the alphabetical naming system, divisional points. These were bigger stops along the rail line where trains would get serviced, like Rivers, Manitoba. Going back to Austin Cross's column, these towns took on the middle names of the railway's top executives, in this case, GTP President Charles Rivers Wilson. Melville, Saskatchewan is named for Charles Melville Hayes. The pattern continues all the way into Alberta. Let's jump ahead to the present day. As I mentioned near the start of the video, the GTP went bankrupt and was merged into the Canadian National Railways. Now with that merger came a lot of redundant trackage. Many lines that were formerly important parts of the Trans-Canada network were relegated to branch line status or abandoned altogether. However, the Grand Trunk Pacific was very well built, and it's mostly still in active service. CN's Trans-Canada Main Line uses the former GTP from Portage la Prairie, Manitoba to Prince Rupert, BC on the Pacific coast. In fact, the track that runs through Portage la Prairie still carries the name of Charles Rivers Wilson as the Rivers Subdivision. The major casualty of the Alphabet Line is the branch that ran from Sioux Lookout down to Thunder Bay. Those tracks have now been abandoned for 30 years. It's a rugged part of the country where towns didn't always spring up along the railway, and when the train stopped running, the forest started swallowing up the area once more. My thanks to Dave from the Port Arthur, Duluth, and Western Railway website for letting me use a bit of his footage. He's working on hiking the entire length of the Graham subdivision end to end, and he makes videos of his trips on YouTube. I'll link his channel down below. The Grand Trunk Pacific's Alphabet Railway is a curious leftover from the colonization era that you can still see in the present day, and you can take a trip on what's left of the GTP. The easiest way is probably by car. If you take the Trans-Canada Highway, you'll be driving on the old GTP right-of-way for about 40 kilometers between Winnipeg and Portage la Prairie. Along that stretch, you'll find spots on the map named from Beaudry to Fortier in alphabetical order. But if you want the true train experience, Via Rail's The Canadian uses the former Alphabet Line from Portage la Prairie to Jasper, and the Skeena will take you the rest of the way to Prince Rupert. If you ever manage to get a ticket on one of those trains, you'll be traveling on a unique part of Canada's living history. Thanks for watching.